to Learning Unlocked. I'm your host, Britt Bingold. As an instructional specialist in Gilbert, Arizona, I'm a total nerd when it comes to classroom strategies and educational pedagogy. Educators are the key holders to unlocking learning for students. So today, as always, my goal is to provide you with resources and tools, the keys, to enable and accelerate learning for all students. Thanks for joining me today. Let's get started. What is up today, key holders? I hope you guys are having a wonderful day and that you guys are feeling like you're killing it either in the classroom or in the workspace that you're in, because with crazy times like it is now, it is nice to feel like you're doing good in one area of your life. So I hope today is that day for you. Before we get started today, I just wanted to make a quick announcement again that if you are listening to this podcast as a Gilbert Public Schools employee, that you can actually get professional development recertification credit for this podcast. You get an hour, so you just need to go to the digital PD portion of the Employee Hub and you'll be able to get more information there. Welcome to episode 4 of Learning Unlocked. Today we are going to be discussing 3 ways to set high expectations for your students. Ways to get all students to reach for the stars and try to get them to take whatever learning they are doing in the classroom and be able to apply it to a relevant situation where they feel like they are getting their money's worth from that strategy and from that skill and concept. Today I am interviewing Jennifer Schrenk. She is amazing. She has a bachelor's in special education, a master's in educational leadership, and she's had so many different roles in the district. She's just been in the classroom, in early childhood classrooms. She's been in urban and rural schools. So I just feel like her experience and what she's bringing to the table is amazing. And if she can narrow it down to 3 ways to set those high expectations, I need to know those 3 ways. So here is my interview with Jennifer Schrenk. I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I did. Hi Jennifer, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Britt. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much for agreeing. I know it's kind of like a scary new thing, but we're trying something new out and I am extremely thrilled to be able to do it. Where I just want to get started just to know a little bit more about you. If you could just give us a quick overview of, your your role in education, what you're working on now, what your passions are.
Great, sure. So I've been in education for over 20 years and I've worked within the classroom. I've also developed my own education curriculum company called Astute Hoot to create resources for teachers. And I've worked with training educators and administrators in high needs and urban environments through an alt-route teacher prep program called the New Teacher Project.
Awesome.
Currently, I work at Mesquite Elementary School, and I've been in the role of special ed resource teacher, but I'll be moving into the reading specialist role for this upcoming year. So I'm super excited to move into that role.
Well, it sounds like you're already busy, but then you're also a mom.
Yes, I have 4 crazy boys. I have a 15-year-old and almost 13-year-old. And I have 2 new stepsons that are 11 and 9. So we are a very busy and active household full of lacrosse and fishing, hiking, fun things like that.
I know. And it's so funny. And I was looking at your bio, I thought, oh my gosh, but lacrosse, like no one plays lacrosse in Arizona. And I played in high school at Gilbert High. And my daughter now plays for this little program called Pixie Sticks. And so it's just so funny that we have that lacrosse connection. And then we usually go to California in the summer as well. I saw you write that, but this summer we had to kind of rethink that because of everything that's going on with the beaches being closed. So I think we're going to head up to Greer and do like a cabin trip or something so we can keep our social distancing.
That sounds super fun. Yes, we're still kind of monitoring the situation in California, so we'll see what happens towards
I
the end of
know.
our break.
It was one of those things where it's like, do we get our money? It's so hard. You're like, you want to get your money back? Do you wait? I don't know. But yeah, it's just been such a weird year for sure.
Yes.
Um, okay, well, great. That's awesome. So this first question is kind of odd. And I think it just kind of came out of my head. And when we think of our topic today, which is setting high expectations for students, I think all teachers wake up in the morning and they are like, I have high expectations for my students. I really don't think a lot of teachers believe their expectations are too low. But especially through the lens of a special educator, could you give us kind of an example from that perspective of when you've seen kind of a discrepancy happen between high expectations and maybe low expectations for students?
Sure. I think the key in this area is really finding the right balance of compassion and rigor. I
Okay.
think sometimes teachers can jump too quickly to help students and over accommodate and provide too much support for
Hmm.
kids who are struggling, um, and and it turns out to look like they have low expectations for the students. They're giving them the super easy books to read. They're shortening all their work, and they're not providing them appropriate access to the grade level content and the higher order thinking. So it's really finding that right balance. I have a good example from this year. I had a student, I'll just call her Jay from this year. She was a
Perfect.
fourth grader and she transferred to our school at the beginning of the school year, and she was basically a non reader. She came in at the beginning first grade reading level. She immediately started shutting down.
Mhm.
Lots of tears in her eyes. If she was
Oh.
ever asked to read, even in a small group or one on one, she would read with a whisper level, stumble over her words, and just really refuse to do anything independently. So I worked closely with her gen ed teacher and we put some supports in place. But the most important thing was that we always made sure she tried and attempted things on her own. We gave her the appropriate supports, but we never let her just get away with doing nothing. And slowly she started to come along. And then towards the end of the last quarter, when we were in school right before spring break, I walked into her gen ed classroom to just drop something off for the teacher. And the student Jay raised her hand. They were working on a ready gen text, which we all know is very rigorous
Oh,
and
very rigorous, yeah, and super
challenging.
new for all students, not even just her, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And I stopped to see what would happen, and the teacher called on her, and she read aloud a portion of the text in front of the entire class, and she read it beautifully. And the teacher and I just looked at each other. Tears were in our eyes, and we just
Oh,
gave
I
her the
bet.
biggest praise. It was amazing. So, to me, that's, holding those high expectations while still providing the right support for students.
And not letting them give up. I think, we know that self-concept as a learner is, so important to whether they're going to actually learn in your classroom or not, and if they just do not feel like they can do it, they will shut down. So it sounds like you guys together were able to work together with her to just break down those barriers and say, like, you can do this and have kind of a growth mindset with her. Just because you came in at this level doesn't mean that we can't end up at this other level. And that's so awesome. That puts tears in my eyes. I just love those stories. That's great.
I know. I really wish we had one more quarter with her because she was on such a roll, but I
She
know.
was. Well, maybe, yeah, maybe at home she could do a little bit more reading, and then when you see her next year, hopefully we'll
Yes,
get
for
get her
sure.
going. Yeah. So I've seen teachers. So it's so funny because we're talking about praise, right, and classroom praise, and I've seen a lot of teachers. This new job is so interesting for me because I go in and out of a lot of classrooms. When you're a teacher, and I was a high school teacher, especially, you're kind of just in like your box and you just kind of like do your thing, and you don't really know what other teachers are doing. And so by having this new position and going into so many classrooms over the course of the last year, I see teachers praise only correct answers a lot. And then they like support lower achievers by like just going slower paced. So these teaching practices seem to feed lower expectations. And so my question to you, I guess, is like, how can teachers flip the script a little bit and like promote higher level expectations to all students? Like, and like you said, even the students like Jay, like how can they not, only praise the correct answers, but also praise like, hey, like it's okay to struggle. Like we all struggle. So if you could just give me like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think, the key is to provide tools and support and guidance to students so they could reach those high expectations rather than lowering them. We really want to empower students to complete their work with independence rather than shutting down. And
Mhm.
a lot of times I see teachers do this successfully by front loading scaffolds that they could have ready in case they see that students need that support. Now, they may not always need to use those scaffolds, they don't always have to implement them, but that they have thought through what can I do if I see students struggling or some misconceptions or gaps in learning. And so those things could look like having writing frames ready to go or word banks, examples of high quality work, steps for a process, doing some extra modeling for students or chunking them into smaller parts. All of those things help kids access the content more successfully, and they bring the anxiety down of a huge assignment or something that seems out of their reach. If you break it into those smaller parts, and sometimes just the kids knowing, oh, here's something that will help you, I want you to try it, and then you could walk away, and gives them that confidence that they could at least try it instead of becoming so overwhelmed that they give up.
Well, and it's so funny because now that you're telling me like more about the front loading, I always would give them sentence stems. And I taught freshman through junior AP. I mean, like sometimes they're like, I always would tell them, don't let the blank paper win. Like if you're in
Hmm.
a battle, like don't let it win. You can do this. And sometimes even just that simple sentence frame that would take me 2 seconds to say, then as soon as they have something down, they're off to the races, and they might even go back and rephrase that sentence to something a little bit more their style or their writing style. But I think sometimes when they just don't know where to start, I hate that people think like sentence frames are like a way of cheating, or they're not going to learn if they always are provided these scaffolds. But I've seen it in an AP junior English class where I've given frames and they've been able to then have them break away from them and then actually perform even better. But they just needed that place to start so that they felt like it was more manageable and not so overwhelming.
Yes, I totally agree. And, those scaffolds should definitely be gradually removed as the students begin to show more independence and growth and mastery. But, we want to keep in mind that a productive struggle is healthy, but complete frustration is not. That's when
Right.
kids don't get anything out of them.
Right. Yeah. And productive struggle, I think is something a lot of teachers shy away. I think they see the students get frustrated and then they're out. And at that point it's too late. You kind of have to catch them a little bit earlier in that struggle and give a support, I feel like. Because as soon as my students would like shut down, I felt like, oh, I just missed that, like they struggled too much and now they've kind of gone over the edge and I
Yeah.
have to kind of bring them back. And so a lot of times, even just like reminding them, like, you've done this before. Remember when we did this, and having them use some retrieval practice or things like, mindfulness, and having them like, okay, let's really stretch ourselves and take a breath and remember that you know how to do this before they kind of fall off the ledge with productive struggle. That's what makes it healthy. Because I think sometimes they're like, you got a productive struggle, and students just are like, no, I'm frustrated now, and then we're kind of at square one again and we have to restart.
For sure. That's a great point.
So high expectations and student grouping, I feel like really go hand in hand because I've seen a lot of students be able to reach higher levels of thinking in cooperative learning settings. But I feel like, especially with Governor Ducey coming out last week and saying, we're going to go back into school.
but here's some of our kind of conditions. How do you think this like social distancing and those procedures coming in the fall? I'm trying to wrap my mind around how to do this. And I was wondering if you had any ideas that you were thinking of, especially through a lens of special education and at an administrator level. We group students, or I used to group students based on like sometimes ability level, where I would put like maybe a high student with a medium low student, kind of do like some Kagan strategies. But it's harder to do that when they're like all separated across the room. So I don't know. What are you thinking on this? I know that's kind of like a question that none of us really know right now, but I just think the more we try to think on it, maybe we can come to good conclusions getting back into the fall.
Yes, so we are definitely going to have to be thinking differently on how to deliver instruction
Yeah.
with those groupings. I was thinking a little bit about how we could take some of the technology that we've started to use during our distance learning and continue that when we're in the classroom. Things like shared documents, Flipgrid, Google Classroom, and discussion boards. In that,
Mm-hmm.
students can be working on a project or a discussion question, and instead of being right next to each other working on it, they could work collaboratively on a digital format. I think that would be a nice way to continue all the great things that we've introduced to them since we've been working from home, and then continue it and just take it to the next level. There's a lot more we could do when we're in person and could model things better for them and make sure that they all have access to technology. So I'm kind of excited to see what that will look like and what creative things teachers will come up with in using technology.
I mean, just seeing what some teachers created in 48 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I was like so impressed. And I just hope that we don't go back to doing like our regular, what we were doing 9 to 5. I just feel like there's going to be an ebb and a flow right now in education, where we're going to be face to face one moment, and then the next minute we're going to be remote, and then we're going to go back face to face. And I feel like if teachers are able to set good norms and high expectations in a digital setting with collaboration, obviously, is what I'm kind of talking about with students. That way, when we do go remote, if we have to, they can, like, okay, no, I need to get on. Like, because I feel like a lot of teachers are like, my kids aren't even showing up for my WebExes. Like, there's no way they're going to like go onto a classroom discussion board, right? But I think it's because they never had to do an online discussion board before. So they didn't, even in class, with the teacher. I think they were like, it was intimidating to students. And every student was in so many different situations. Like, some had technology and some had no technology, and some had a parent that could help them and some didn't. And I think they were dealing with so much that the more we can include technology and not just make it like a digital worksheet, but like use a discussion forum website like Parlay and say, okay, here, I've set this up, you guys are all going to do it in class today, but then when we're done, it's only going to take like 15 minutes, but then we're done, I'm going to project a lot of the stuff on the screen and we're going to really talk about it as a group. And just like setting that up, I think, so that way if they have to do it on their own eventually, it's not as scary. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I love that. And I think building those routines and procedures and that comfort with the technology and familiarity is important because we did have a lot of different tools thrown at us and it was new for
Yeah.
everyone. So I think if as students and teachers become more comfortable and they'll each find the ones that work for them and their
Yeah.
content and their level,
Yeah.
it'll become just part of their natural routine. And as you were talking, I'm like, how cool would it be then to start connecting with students in the similar grade levels in a different school, in a different district, in a
Oh, I
different
would love that.
country? So
Yes.
that would be
Because you
really
can. You can
hmm
say, and then I feel like sometimes when we do things digitally in class, like, oh, we're going to make a video as a class, or oh, we're going to do this, and then they share it with their peers, and the peers are like, cool, we know you're Joe. But like if they're sharing it with the class next door or a class at a different school, that is a totally different authentic audience. So I think you're right. I think that we could really do a lot with that. And I think our student work and the expectations would definitely jump up to a higher level, because then they're like, oh, it's not just my teacher and my 5 friends in my class that are going to be watching this. It's like, I don't know who these people are that are going to be listening or engaging with me. So I really need to come and bring my best, you know?
Yes, I love that. And that just naturally builds in those high expectations that the students would be setting for themselves.
Yeah, well, and then they would have to think kind of on their feet creatively too, if they got into a discussion board, or if they got into a platform and somebody already said what they were thinking. They're going to have to do that. Oh, I got to think on my feet. I got to be think more critically and be more creative, which are skills they're going to need, as they move into their adulthood. Because sometimes I come into a meeting and I'm thinking I have everything I need, and all of a sudden I realize, like, wow, I have nothing new to bring to the table. So I need to work on and take a step back and think about, okay, what is missing here, to the conversation. And I think that would push them even to more rigor, find out what is missing from the conversation and add it. So, okay, awesome. So, all right, now we're going to really dig in. So, you have 3 concrete ways, and I love that you brought it down to 3, because I feel like when you give a number, it's like, I just feel like it's more manageable for teachers. Like, how do I do this? So, how does a teacher, okay, they feel like they could do a better job at high expectations and kind of like really raising the bar? What are those 3 concrete ways that you really have seen just be successful? And you've seen it from special ed to admin to rural, places. I mean, you've seen the gamut. So, I would just love for you to just dig in here and just give our teachers some ways to do that in their classrooms.
Sure. Yeah, I thought a lot about this topic because you're right. A lot of times we have those philosophical beliefs like, yes, of course we have high expectations, but what does that really look like? What can I do? And really, for every level, every content area, I not only thought about it for my own students, but for my own boys as they're,
Yeah,
school is hard as you get up in the grade levels, and it means so much more for their future. So I didn't want to be the mom that's pushing my expectations on them. I want to hold the high expectations, but help them feel those expectations for themselves and want to do it. So
it's so hard to get that intrinsic motivation. I'm seeing it with my 3-year-old right now, and that my and my my 4-year-old. I mean, yeah, my 7-year-old. I'm like, you gotta want it. It has to come from within. I can't just keep bribing you with hot chocolate. Like, you just gotta do it. So yes, okay, I'm excited.
okay, so
Tell me how.
I'll first just overview the 3 different ways, and then I'll go into a little more detail. So the first
Okay.
first one, I focused around cueing. So cueing students to answer questions with success, meaning that it's not okay to not try. So that was the first way.
Okay.
The second way, it's really important to provide strong and weak examples of learning tasks. So being very clear on expectations.
Okay.
And the third way was teaching students to monitor their own progress and set goals during learning. So helping them set up pathways for their own success. So that's the 3 umbrellas. And now I'll kind of go back and talk about each of them. So the first one, the cueing. That came out of my work with Doug Lemov's Teach Like a Champion. And his work really breaks down teaching strategies into small bite-sized things that you could immediately turn around and do in the classroom. And this particular strategy comes from the no opt-out strategy. And this is something when I was working with the high needs schools in urban and rural areas that we taught new teachers to do. This is something that you could implement right away, that it's not okay to call on a student for them to just say, I don't know, and move on. Each student should have the opportunity and the expectations that they can come to the right answer. So one thing that made me think of how important this one is I was talking to my oldest son. He was in a freshman this year. And I was just asking him how his classes were going and how his teachers were. And, he kind of gave me the brief overview. And I'm like, well, what about your English class? And, he gives typical one-word responses. And he's like,
Yeah.
well, she's all right, but she just won't let us say, I don't know. She will stick with you until you get to the right answer. And secretly, I'm like, yes, I love this woman. She's
Yeah.
giving no opt out, because
I love it.
he would just be happy to slink down into his chair, just say, I don't know, and move on, even though he's super, super smart and can do all the work and has amazing ideas. I think he can tend in certain subjects to just take the path of least resistance. So,
I think a lot of kids can. I think a lot of kids do. They're just like, I'm here. Let me just get through the day. And they're smart and they have so much to provide. And they just kind of, if you don't kind of get on them, they just won't do it.
exactly. And in this strategy, there's different cues that you could use, and some of them are very basic, like, you provide the answer and the student will just repeat the answer. That's like level one.
Okay.
Then you could have the student ask another student for support, and then the initial student you called on would answer. But the main one that I find most effective is that you provide a cue or a strategy, and the student uses that strategy or cue to find the answer.
I love
And
that.
I've seen such amazing growth with my students that in the beginning, I'm providing a lot of cues and strategies and steps. But then as the year progresses, they have that toolbox of strategies and cues. And then when they get stuck, they can use it themselves. So, for example, as a resource teacher, this past year I was working with third and fourth graders, and a big focus of our reading work was working on decoding multisyllabic words.
Oh
So,
my.
a lot of
Yes.
times those are really overwhelming for kids, for struggling readers, beginning readers. They just see a long word and shut down. So, in my classroom, we have these strategy animal characters, and each little animal character is tied to a specific research based strategy. So for multisyllabic words, we have Charlie the chunking chipmunk.
Cute.
So they love him, they think he's real, and he's a helper. So in the beginning, when they would get stuck on a word, I would say, do you need Charlie's help? And so we would chunk the syllables into, he had little acorns, and use the syllable division rules and find the vowels and walk through it together. As the year progressed, I heard the kids saying, I'll use Charlie. And I saw that cognitive work shift more and more onto them. And then I just saw them, scooping with their pencils or with their fingers. And then eventually it became automatic. But they had the tools to solve the problem themselves, to figure it out. But they knew that if they were stuck, I would help them. So that really, the idea of no opt out, meaning if you're stuck on something, I'm not just going to move on. I'm going to stick with you, and you're going to stick with it until you figure it out. And that the kids feel so proud of themselves, and it really empowers them to know that they have strategies and they can figure this out on their own.
Yeah, and you said the cue was on your board or on your wall, right?
Yeah, sometimes it was a visual cue, sometimes it was something we would work through together, or
Okay.
mhm.
Because I feel like a lot of teachers sometimes they don't use their wall space as effectively as they could. They could really have cues for learning in around that students can just look to and be like, oh yeah, 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 and then immediately start to and then they could rotate a lot of those cues out based on as they see their students progress and not need those not crutches necessarily, but you know what I mean, they don't need those cues anymore to find the answer. So I was excited that they had the scooping, and they knew, and I love that it was kinesthetic too, but they were able to provide they're able to see it too, as well as, and you as well as you helping them.
Yes, it just makes it really concrete, and it provides an anchor for them. When they have a
Yeah.
visual or a movement with it, then they're able to access that strategy more readily, because it's not some abstract idea that I just use once or twice. It's our consistent set of cues and strategies that they use. And the nice part also was that it was immediate error correction. I didn't wait till they were done with the whole assignment or done with the whole passage. When they were struggling, we would stop, immediately address it, use the cue, figure it out, build those new pathways in their brain. So now they could access that strategy more readily the next time they come to a similar type of word or math problem or whatever we were working on.
Which is huge. I mean, I think a lot of it's so interesting because John Hattie has really separated out formative assessment and feedback. And originally, when we were studying him, formative assessment was up really high, and it's dropped down so low now because feedback and immediate feedback to students right in the moment is so much more effective, and it gives them so much more bang for their buck in their learning than just giving them a formative assessment, maybe ticket out the door, and not having like that feedback until maybe the next day and they've already forgotten. And so I love that you said that it gave you that opportunity to do that initial correction right away, because I feel like that definitely sticks with the kids a lot longer.
Definitely. Yes. So that's been one main way that I've used. The other way that has been very effective in my classroom was providing strong and weak examples of learning tasks. So if we have a bigger assignment or even just, something new that we're doing, I spend a lot of time modeling the expectations. We have clear checklists or rubrics provided so they know exactly what a 3 looks like, what a 2 looks like, what a 1 looks like. Um,
Awesome.
and that also makes it very real and manageable to students. Sometimes when they don't have a clear understanding, they're just kind of guessing, throwing darts at a
Mhm.
dartboard. Like, I think this is what she wants, or I
Yeah.
guess I'll do this. This sounds right. But when we really spell it out with them, it helps them visualize their success and they have something to work towards. Other things that we've done with the providing examples is, we'll ask a student if we could use their work and go through it and edit and revise it together. So it's never like a punitive thing or, aha, I got you, you got all this wrong, but it's something that we work through as a group. Like, how could we improve this sentence, or what would be a better word choice here? And we work through it collaboratively. And that has been super effective as well. So then by the end, they have a awesome final finished piece, and the other kids could use that as a great model and example of how they could go back and finish editing and revising their work.
Oh my gosh, Jennifer, you're speaking my language. Like, so as an English teacher, this is what we did. I mean, we modeled and gave models and took student names off of papers, and it was a community thing, but it's like if they see it and they know what they're expected to do, they have the rubric, they've got the models, they've got sentence stems, and they've got, all these supports. They feel like they can do it. They feel like they are able to, and sometimes I would even use it as like, this was a really strong example. I would have kids be like, I can do that, like not out loud, but like, I can do that, but better. Like I had students that were so competitive that if
Yeah.
I said that was a great example, they're like, yeah, but I'll give a better one, or I would have the reverse of students that would say, wow, that was really good. I didn't even think about that. But now that I've seen that, like, I can do that. I could. But here's the thing. When I first modeled, like I wrote an essay in front of my students, or I would, go over examples in front of them, maybe on a dot cam or just projecting them on the screen, I was really nervous the first few times they did it as a teacher because I was so used to just being in my classroom with my pen and grading, and then giving them their papers back and being done. And I realized very quickly that that wasn't working, but having to think on my feet sometimes. And because I would even take, like, hey, you guys have, 10 minutes to do this, quick little paragraph. And then I'm going to take one from each group. And then I'm going to go over them under the dot cam. I had to be on my game and I had to know what I was looking for. And typically it was one thing. So I was looking for topic sentences, or I was looking for, embedded quotes or something like that, so it wasn't like I was grading the whole thing. But I feel like encouraged that you're saying this, and I want to encourage other teachers that it may seem scary at first to throw work up there from your students and verbally give them feedback, but it is like they need that teacher clarity, because without that teacher clarity, they're just going to not understand where that you're taking them in the lesson. So yeah, I just like literally when I read that section, I was like, yes, this is I
Yeah.
love it.
And I love what you mentioned, how sometimes students would see an example and it would be a springboard to other creative ideas of how they could expand on something. And I think that's
Mhm.
important for teachers to make sure they relate to the students. Like, this isn't the only way, but these are the components that make this
Yeah.
really good. And to encourage kids who think outside of the box and to take it a step further and to show multiple ways of doing something amazing, not just one specific way. So that's what's exciting. I love when I hear kids say, "Can I show you a different way that I did it?" And we talk through it and talk about, what fits the criteria and how it fits, and if there's anything else they need to add. So it's very exciting to see their little brains start, you know, thinking and expanding and creating. I love that.
Yeah, and it gives them some autonomy over what they're doing. I think it's okay. I would always have like, here's the assignment, but kids would always surprise me with, well, can I do this? Or can I add this in? And I'm like, my answer, was always, of course. I think I rarely said no, because I wanted them to have some choice. And it usually was, like you said, a springboard off a modeled example where all of a sudden the wheels started turning and they were like, oh, but actually, I'm actually passionate about this and I could talk about this. And it was still in my parameters of what I was asking them to do. It just wasn't something I had thought of. And just because I didn't think of it didn't mean it wasn't, a good way or an interesting take on what to do for the assignment. So yeah, totally.
For sure. Well, the third way that I had listed to set those high expectations for students was to teach students to monitor their progress and set goals during learning. And I know that's something that we've talked about a lot as teachers over the past many, many years. But the key here is to inspire kids to meet their own goals and not manipulate them into getting them to do what you want them to do.
Right.
And I love when kids really take ownership of their goals and start thinking about what they could do to reach those goals. They revisit them on a regular basis, chart their progress, self-reflect. I've had great conversations with kids like, "Oh, look at the great growth you did. What did you do to get to this place?" Or if they start to plateau, is there something that you've been doing differently or haven't been doing? And kids are usually pretty honest about their efforts. And
They're so honest. It's scary sometimes. I'm like, wow, you really just that was it. I was, when we did learning goals and scales in my class, they were really honest with me, and I was surprised.
yeah, and you'd be surprised you could do this with the youngest kids, kinder, first graders, some basic
Yeah.
goals, kids with special needs, kids with behavior issues, older kids, any subject area. So that's why I love this, and that's just such a great life skill for people
Hmm.
to have. And I try to model that as well and set my own goals for the students, and as a parent as well, I set goals and we talk about, our progress towards the goals, um, and really helping them understand that there's a connection between your effort and your progress. Because sometimes that's when kids tend to give up, where they're like, well, there's nothing I could do to get any better in this, or, I already have a bad grade. I'm just going to give up. So seeing that there's actionable steps that they could take to make growth and progress, whether it's a skill they want to learn or a grade they want to improve or a task they want to accomplish. Um, I've just seen kids really step up and surprise me when they set their own goals and work towards them.
Well, and I love when they surprise themselves. It's like their self-efficacy as a learner just blows up, and you're like, yeah, kid, you're awesome. You were just so down on yourself. Because you may made these goals that were reachable for themselves. And sometimes when they go over and overextend what they thought they could do, I love seeing that. I also love that you mentioned self-reflection, because I feel like even teachers, we don't have time to self-reflect a lot. And it's so important, I think, in data teams and PLCs, and like, how did that unit go? How did this project work? For students, if they're able to self-reflect, I feel like, especially with all of the new curriculums and standards, and let's just throw in a pandemic and distance learning and hornets and whatever. Let's just throw stuff at teachers. I feel like we're so booked. I feel like they're like, we have to cover this, we have to cover this, we have to cover this. And I don't feel like there's that time to breathe for students where they have like built in self-reflection. And it makes all the difference if they can just take some time to self-reflect. And I don't know if that's something that you've seen. I know you've said it's successful and it's one of your 3 ways to set high expectations, but I feel like a lot of teachers are like, we got to move on to the next thing. And I totally get that. Like, I've been there where I'm like, I don't have time to self-reflect because I'm trying to recorrect all the stuff, that everything that I just got back that was not right. But instead of me recorrecting it, I could have the kids do it. They could have self-reflected it. So yeah,
Yeah.
I love that one.
Yeah, and I love that when they start setting their goals and then they talk about them with other students as part of the reflection process and find similarities or differences or things that worked for another student that they might want to try, or a tool or strategy or something that's been helpful. So that's, just another way to add collaboration.
Well, and I think a lot of teachers think self-reflection has to be this big assignment, like this huge form, and it really could just be a 10-minute, bell work with a partner, just going over, what they learned from the day before, or what they learned from, their goal setting chart. I mean, it could be something really quick. So I don't think it has to be a big thing. I just think it needs to be built in our teacher brains, that it needs to be built in.
I agree
Yeah.
100%.
Okay, so we're kind of getting to the end of the interview. Yeah, thank you so much. You've had like such amazing answers. What would you say for, okay, I'm a first or second year teacher. I'm trying to establish routines and procedures. I've got these 3 ways that are awesome for high expectation setting. But like, how do I do that at the beginning of the year? So like, I mean, it's obviously, this is something that builds throughout the year, but like, what would you say, like, walking in the door works? And then maybe what has failed for you?
Well, I kind of scripted out 2 things. I jotted down some notes. The first way was, I think it's so important for teachers themselves to have a clear vision of what success looks like for their students and for themselves. Like,
Yeah.
they really need to have it outlined. And it could look different for, if you're teaching multiple groups of students or multiple classes, but really think about, this is what success looks like, and set goals for yourself. Um, and really drill down to, what does successful participation look like? What does successful engagement look like? Work quality. So that vision, I think, is critical for beginning teachers, and really all teachers, to have that clear
Yeah.
vision at the start of the year. And
Well, and
the
the students need to know. Like, I feel like teachers know. We make our lesson plans, we lay them out, we know exactly what's going to happen, and then we just teach. And the
Mhm.
students are like, what? Like, it just seems like it's isolated, like little day-to-day things. Like, I feel like the teachers have a clear vision, which is awesome, but then definitely like put it in the hands of your kids, because they need to know too. So yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
And
totally.
yeah, communicate that, not just at the, meet the teacher first week of school, continually go back and revisit.
Yeah.
And that brings me to my second one, kind of looping back to what we were just talking about in the last question, is that teachers should really have a clear plan for students to set goals, self-assess, and revisit their progress, built into your actual curriculum map and lesson plans. And I think that's one area that I could say that I failed before. I've, started the year, I'm like, we're going to do this goal setting and
Yeah.
self-reflection, and I create portfolios and these great forms, and we do it like once or twice. And then exactly what you were saying before, we get so caught up with the curriculum and assemblies and, all the crazy
Yes.
stuff that's always the first thing on the chopping block. And I just can't do that. It has to be built in. So, whatever works for your particular situation, I think that should be a non-negotiable, that you have those self-reflection points and those goal-setting points, because it's so meaningful for students and teachers. And it's just an important way to build that growth mindset for students, to give them those great study skills and life skills.
Oh my gosh, amen, sister. Like that, you said the word portfolio, and I literally like got a pit in my stomach because I have tried to do a portfolio and failed miserably year after year after year because I just felt like I needed to get through things. And honestly, there were so many assignments that I should have just totally cut, to be honest, and had this be the focus, because this is what grows kids. This is what kids need. And so yeah, I just, as soon as you said that word, I was like, that was my that was totally my downfall too. I'm like, we're gonna make a portfolio of all your essays, and then at the end of the year we're gonna do a reflection. And it was like it never happened. And I always felt like I let my students down and I let myself down. And it was because I spent, sometimes even to my own detriment, too much time on like just fun, cute, creative activities that not necessarily did much for their learning. You know what I mean? They were just things that I had always done that I just didn't want to give up. And I think sometimes we need to give up a few of those things, not all, but to make the goal setting and the reflection process a priority for our kids.
Exactly. Yeah. And just also making it manageable. So when you talk about the portfolio, maybe as teachers, we need to scale it back a little bit,
Yeah.
but, adjust our expectations, but, so that we're not doing all the work, find a way for kids
The
to do
kids to
most
do
of the work.
it.
Yeah. And
Well, and
now,
especially with digital too, right? They should be able to have a digital something. They have Google like Drive and Classroom, and so
exactly. Well, if someone
yeah.
figures it out, please share. I would love
We're
to
gonna
hear a
put
podcast.
Stacy Pasquale on it. I'm just gonna call her and I'm like, okay, this is now your new job. I need you to figure out how to do this for teachers, because yeah, I'd always have them buy like a 3-prong folder and have them do that, and it just never ever worked. I'm just gonna confess, it just never worked.
Well, thanks for your
So
confession. I'm glad it
yeah,
wasn't just me.
it was not just you. As soon as you said that word, I was like, like, and so what I ended up seeing working though more was having my goals on the board, referencing them often, having students reflect on like half sheets of paper consistently throughout a unit. That's what worked for me. But having them keep all their work and reflect on it was, I just could not keep, it was just not my skill. So if there is a teacher out there who has the skill, please share with us, because we need it so badly. Okay, Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on today. Like, if listeners want to learn more from you, where can they find you?
Yes, they could email me at my GPS email, jennifer.schrenk@gilbertschools.net. I also have an Instagram, which is AstuteHoot, and my website is astutehoot.com.
Which I'm
And
following right now. I'm doing it. It's happening.
awesome. Thank you. And then, of course, my personal Facebook.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on today and just sharing your experience with us, with your students, and giving us 3 great concrete ways to set high expectations for kiddos. I know a lot of teachers are definitely going to appreciate what you've had to say today. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. It was great talking to you, and I'm excited to see what this new year will bring.
Yeah, it's going to bring something. So everyone's buckle up. But you know what? It's, my husband said something to me like, it'll be different, but it'll be okay. And I said, you know why it's going to be okay? Because teachers can do anything. We adjust like no one else. So if anybody can do it, teachers can. So
Yes, I'm sending positive vibes to all the teachers out there.
I know. Enjoy their summer. I'm like, enjoy your summer first.
Yes,
You need it. You earned it. So, okay. So thanks so much, Jennifer. Have a good one.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Learning Unlocked and finding out more about 3 ways to have high expectations for your students. Just a reminder that we are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at GPS Prof Growth. That's at GPS PROF GROTH. For the show notes from this episode, please visit our YouTube channel at tinyurl.com/PGD YouTube and select Playlists. If you have time to write us a review on Apple Podcasts, we would appreciate it. The more reviews and ratings we get, the more educators will see our podcast. So if you like what you're hearing and think others would too, please head over and provide a review. Thanks again, and have a wonderful day.